Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the founder and CEO of Wisdom Senior Care, Carolyn Thurston, and the COO, Charles Thurston. Guys, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you both on. We are going to have so much fun, I can already tell. So, all right. Well, Carolyn, you're the founder. Tell us all about Wisdom Senior Care. How did you get this thing started?
Wow. Whenever I'm able to share the story, it goes all the way back to my childhood, but not as far back, but when I was in high school. And I don't know if you remember being in high school and having guidance counselors at the time.
Sure.
And they would say, what are you thinking about doing when you're going to graduate? Because I was in the 11th grade, so it's time to really get serious. I was not an A student. Most of the time, the teachers were saying it was like I was dreaming. I wasn't really paying attention. But I always had this entrepreneurial type spirit about myself. I always had some type of business growing up. Well, one desire that was put in my heart was seniors. I loved being around the older generation. And Frank, at that time, people probably weren't like old, but to me at that time, they were older. So my father was in the Air Force and we had the opportunity to travel to a lot of different countries. And I always noted how other cultures took care of their older generation. It's like they cherished them, right? But even as a young child, I didn't always see that in the United States. And it was really developing a compassion within that I wanted to do something that showed seniors that they were still valued, that they still had something to contribute. Not when you reach a certain age, then you're just thrown into, quote, a facility, right? So I knew I wanted to do this, and I went to my mother. I believe in God, and God gave me this idea, and the name of Wisdom was developed when I was in the 11th grade, and I thought it was going to be an adult daycare. And at that time, because it was in the East, adult daycares were not around, right? Like they are now, but I knew parents would be getting older. They would need to live. My mindset was your parents have to live with you. So you would have children. You have to go to work. So where would your parents go? So since came the idea of Wisdom Senior Care. So all through high school, college, I went the background to get my nursing degree. Still this desire inside of me to step out, open up wisdom. But like most people who have this desire, there was fear, there was doubt, there was not enough faith. I said, I don't have a business degree. I don't have the money, all kinds of excuses. But one day in 2006, so it took me a little while, but in 2000, actually it was 2005 at Christmas time, I was sitting at home and I've always said, I don't want the end of my life to come. And if I had the opportunity to say, what if? I don't ever want to say that. And so I said, okay, God, what's the one thing I can do? The one thing I could do was fill out an application to open a senior in-home care business in the state of North Carolina. And I didn't even understand business, so I put my home address down. And so in 2006, Wisdom Senior Care became in the natural, right? So it came from the spiritual realm to the natural in 2006.
That is incredible. I mean, you were so driven as a teenager.
Yeah.
It's incredible that you had this vision so early on, and to see it through so many years later is fascinating because we get, distracted and caught up in life and things that are thrown at us and different directions. But you stayed true to what your original belief was and your vision as a teen. That's a
Yep. I think I'm hard-headed. I don't quit. I don't give up. I don't care how long it takes. It's gonna happen if that desire is truly put there.
Carolyn, that is one of the most common threads, right? Of the most successful people is just refusing to give up.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. I know when we start out, especially, young people, they're starting out in business and we come up with all the reasons why it won't work and fear
Yes.
kicks in. We never, first of all, think we're good enough, right? Or
That's
know enough.
right. That's
And
right.
definitely don't have enough money
Oh
or the
gosh.
contacts. But if you think back to, I think back to even to some of my most successful franchisees, the truth is some of them became successful just because they hung around long enough. Like they didn't hit immediate
Isn't that
success. I don't know about you, but I didn't quote unquote find myself super successful starting out.
no?
What was life like when you were first starting out?
Wow. At the time, Charles is here. He's a big part of this story because we've always worked even before we got married. One thing that attracted us, I think, is that we could work very well together. And we had businesses before we even got married, right? And so children were small. So Charles did a lot to help me take care of them and make sure things were being done because it was crazy, Frank. At the time, I tell anybody, I was my everything. Only employee, my first clients, someone calls out, I had to go. I could have worked all day, right? Someone calls out of a shift. Well, I gotta go. And he would have to be there with the girls. And look, we had two girls, so having to do their hair, he had to learn to do the girls' hair. But we worked together as a team to make sure that these things could work. So it was really hectic at the very beginning. It was times where I would feel like, Charles, I'm just not sure. Maybe I didn't
Mm.
make the right decision, but he was always there to encourage me and say, no, Carolyn, don't do anything. Let's pray about this first, So we were really great support for each other. And when I felt like I was down, he would be up and vice versa, right? So, but there was so many. I remember one time saying to Charles, you know what? Even our worst day in building this business is better than working for someone else. And that right there just was always my go-to, right? Is,
Mm-hmm.
because no, things don't always work out the way that you want. And Frank, you see a lot of business owners and some people, they don't give it enough time. They don't give enough time for those seeds that they've planted to come up. And they just expect something to happen like just out of the sky, things are just going, and it doesn't happen that way, you know?
Of course, of course. Charles, what do you remember from the very beginning of running the business? Why do you think this thing worked?
Well, like Carolyn said, we were definitely excited about working together as
Mm-hmm.
a husband and wife and as a team. And anyone who knows me, I'm a networker.
Yeah.
And see, I was a Halo adjust in college. I did graduate, but I got kicked out twice. But I love people and I was smart and spoiled, the only child. But we had this grit about us. And what she said, even before wisdom, we were in another business, and we
Mm-hmm.
learned from mentors. And one thing they always taught us, come early, stay late. And we
Mm-hmm.
were a sponge. We soaked up the knowledge, but we didn't know that Q word. And so we wanted to continue just to keep pressing forward. Now, my role at the beginning was more in sales.
Yeah.
So I would go out and I would meet strategic partners,
Mhm.
meet different clients to set up the consultations because I didn't have the medical background.
Mhm.
And then Carlin and I would pivot off of one another when we're doing presentations. And that's basically how we started that foundation of getting the clients.
And let me add that at a crucial, it wasn't like we intended intentionally for Charles and I to be working in the business together, but
Mm-hmm.
life happens. And Charles got, I think, laid off of his job that he was doing. And I told him, I said, okay, Charles, well, why don't you just help me until you find something. Because I said, you're great in sales, because I knew he could open the door. I had to really work on myself because I was really shy. I loved being by myself, but Charles could open up the door. Then I could come in and do the talking, right? And so what was supposed to be for a short term, it's just continued on.
Wow. Carolyn, tell me about some of the challenges that you guys had to overcome early on in running a business, right? You were not an overnight success, were you?
No. I tell people too, it took me, because I had to learn from scratch. You know what I had, Frank? I had
What's that?
passion. I had compassion for the senior population. I knew how to get clients. I knew what they wanted. I knew the target market I was needed to work with. But the one thing that I didn't have, or the many things I didn't have, was how to run a business. I had no idea. And remember, I told you that was one of my reasons for not being hesitant to step out, right? Because I hear
Right.
people going to college, and I had friends and they were doing business majors, business administration. I'm thinking, okay, but they're not doing a business, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that business knowledge. So because I didn't have that, the decisions and things that I just didn't have the knowledge to know what to think. But I had enough passion to work hard, get the clients, get the things working, getting some processes, some systems in place. And so what that led me to do was to have to learn things on the go. Or not even on the go. I had to learn them after, like, you don't do that because this will happen, right? So I had to learn what I call the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, if I can add,
Please.
what happened, and like Carolyn was saying, we had a partner, and that didn't
Oh.
go very well. I just say she was a
Oh, I
nurse like
forgot
mine.
about that part of the story.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny how you
And what was so wild about that story, he
I
did
forgot
some
about
things that wasn't ethical,
that.
but
Mm-hmm.
because of Carolyn's passion and love for the wisdom, she
Right.
bought out for $1, but we had to take all the repercussions of what was left hanging legally, if you know what I mean.
Of
So
course.
that was around 2008, and that was a pivotal moment for us. Because keep in mind, our only source of income was wisdom.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
see,
wow.
I was a dreamer too. I was a loan officer for 5 years with a credit union. I'm like, I'm not gonna be sitting here at a desk giving people money and then looking at walls. No, I have to be out. So once we joined, I joined with wisdom. I wasn't going back. That was yeah,
No
that was
turning
our whole
back.
source of income.
Yeah.
Right.
But 2008 was a pivotal part, and then I let her share when she got to the point where she got burned out.
Okay. Yeah. I want to talk about burnout. That's a huge topic for me. That's a hot button because I experienced it as well. Carolyn, how far in did you get with the business before you started feeling burnout?
Probably around about 2012, 13, 14, 15.
Okay. What were the symptoms? I would love for you to share with the audience because there's people that are experiencing it. Maybe they haven't put their finger on it that it's burnout. I know exactly what it feels like, but would you please share what were you feeling?
So at that period of time, it's just so many different emotions all at one time. So you'll have some really bad days where you're just like, my Lord, what have I done? Okay, how can I get out of this? And what else can I do? Then you get emotions like, see, you shouldn't have done this. Why did you make that decision? Oh, if I could
Mm-hmm.
have an opportunity to start all over. So it's just a rush of different things that were going through my mind. But the biggest thing when I knew I started to lose what I felt was my passion, when you start feeling like you don't want to get up, because I had always, and the reason I left bedside nursing, I only was in it for 1 year after getting out of nursing school. It's because I said, whenever you feel like you can't get up and you're excited about going to work, you need to stop doing that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so from the time I had started Wisdom, it was an excitement, it was a venture. But when all these other negative things that start to come on, you have to really hold on to something that can get you out of that dark space, you know? Sometimes not going to sleep at night because you're doing everything. I was everything. I was the nurse, I was the biller, I was the payroll person, I was the supervisor, and still wife, had two children. They have activities to do. So it was just an overwhelming type thing. And physically, you'll start to feel like, okay, I'm tired inside, where to even take a breath was exhausting. And so I said to Charles one day, I said, you know what, Charles? I think I have lost my passion. And I said, this is really frightening because this is what had helped me keep moving through everything. And I was like, I'm going to have to really look at what is next. And so he said to me, he said, well, Carolyn, don't do anything yet. Just let's pray about this. And so that's what we did. And when I prayed, I went to an event that was at our church. And Frank, we were so busy that we never, church activities, other things outside of what I was doing, I was not doing. I didn't have what people call a balanced life. It was just one thing trying to get this thing going, right? And so Charles had bought some tickets. He said, we're going to go. It was a Valentine's dinner at the church, something so simple. I told him, I said, I'm too tired. I can't even put up enough energy to go. We called 5 friends to give them these tickets. We couldn't even give the tickets away. Everybody had already gotten their tickets. So I said, okay, Charles, we'll go. So I mustered up energy. And when I went there, this is how good God works. When I went there and I sat down, this man that had been in our church all the time, I really didn't know what he did. He's sitting there and he's talking to me the whole night, truly, while we're eating dinner. But he's saying not just idle words. He's saying key targeted words, Frank, that I had not shared with anybody else but Charles, how I was feeling on the inside. And these words he said to me, he said, Carolyn, I want you to get a book called The E-Myth. And he said, I believe that when you read this book, you're going to see yourself on the first couple of pages of this book. And I'm a reader. I love to read, but life gets in the way. So after we left that event, life got in the way. I got busy. I didn't get the book. But guess what? I come back into the office from out seeing clients. Guess who's at my office? That gentleman I had dinner with. We had dinner with. He had physically come to the office, and you know what he did? He bought a copy, a new copy, and said, I want you to read it. He said, I knew you hadn't gone and got it. It's a book, right? So that was a turning point. I went home that night. Frank, I read almost the whole book that night. But remember, he told me, you're going to see yourself on the first couple of pages. I got a little upset about that. A little bit mad too, because the lady in the first, if you read the book, she was like a maniac, right?
Sarah, yep.
I said, oh my gosh. I said, is that how I'm looking to people that see me? So it opened up my eyes. First of all, you got to have a team of people. You can't do it all yourself. And then the next thing it helped me do in the book, it talks about 2 ways you can scale up your business. And one of the ways was franchising. I looked at Charles and I said, Charles, why had we not been, we didn't even know anything about this way, that could even be an option, right? And the reason that franchising stood out, and it was like, you know how a fire gets reignited, is because during that 10, 12, 13 years, I was helping people in North Carolina who wanted to start their own home care business. Frank, I was helping them do that. I was helping them write their policies for the state, get them through the whole process. And you know what? They would still call me, say, Carolyn, this is happening. Carolyn, that is happening. So this was when I heard franchise, I was like, wait a minute, that means I could still do what I love to do and not just be with people for a short term, but for a longer period of time. It reignited that flame inside of me. And boy, did
Mhm.
Charles and I get excited. And we started looking for ways to learn about franchising.
So Frank, here's what's wild. Um, we were in the network marketing business before we started Wisdom. So we had certain intangible skill sets that helped us.
Mhm.
So when that burnout period happened, we was like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and shift. Because at that time, we were running 3 businesses. See, Carolyn's very modest. We had a health academy. It's called
Yep.
Wisdom Health Academy. That's a school. And she's running that plus this part with the state. Now, I was kicking and screaming because I'm like, you don't have a
Oh, he was
24-hour day.
kicking.
What else are you going to do? And I couldn't teach the class. So when these folks would come, you had entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, partners, and franchises.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
once we heard that more than once, we started doing research and we found the International Franchise Association. And we were the type, we jumped all in.
Yep.
So we immediately went to the first conference that was in Phoenix. And that's where we met Stan Friedman. And Stan also introduced us down the road to the author of the E-Myth book.
Michael Gerber.
That's right. That's right. But then we started building those because we knew how to do the relationship piece.
Mhm.
So that's where that reigniting burn
Yeah.
came about with franchise. And one other point I want to make, when she started back in '06, it was February. Do you know we were our own bank? Nobody would give us nothing.
Mm.
That's tough.
That was very, very tough. Very tough. And we know what happened 2 years later, obviously, economically.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. But during those periods of time, and this is something that why senior in-home care or any home care health industry is such a great area to focus on, because even though the economy was looking bad during those years, it wasn't bad for us during those years. And in
Mhm.
fact, when it seems like it's the most challenging times, for in the economy seem to be some of our highest grossing times. So in that period of 7, 8, 9, where we were starting to struggle along, things were starting to happen. Again, I would say even during COVID time, that same thing occurred as well, right? Because one thing that doesn't change is people when they have physical needs that have to be taken care of. Life all around us changes, but how much of that they need, that doesn't change.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you franchise. Let's talk franchising now. So you franchised a company, or you opened your first one in 2017, right? You've have 12
Mhm.
franchise locations, 2 company owned, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, New York. Who do you think is the best person to own a Wisdom senior care franchise? What does it take to thrive in that business?
I think it really takes that compassion. It really does. And that's why it's one of our core values. Now, our very first core value is faith. And they need to be a person who truly has faith in wisdom is what I'm speaking of. Faith that
Mhm.
wisdom is the right place for them to be able to achieve whatever goal it is that they have set for themselves. And then having that compassion to really see how in their local community, the difference that they can make for families who are taking care of loved ones, seniors, also for employees. Do you realize that's why I love what we do? Because not only are we helping one group of people, there are 3 sides to the people we're able to help in any local community. We have our these are our caregivers, and we call them
Mhm.
skilled experts because it takes skill to allow someone to come into your own personal space. You just can't do that. You've got to have some skill about it. But we bring these skilled experts on and we show them career paths. We show them how they can create a career ladder, right? So that's one way that a franchise owner, so if they have the faith, they have the compassion for people, because majority of the caregivers or skilled experts are women and a lot of them are single moms, and a lot of them are, they maybe graduated high school. So you've got to look at what you're doing. You're creating, you're changing lives, even not just that person. It can be generation of lives that are being changed, right? Then you have the families that you're giving them that peace of mind so they can still live their life. So I think to answer your question, it's that those are the key things that would help someone or the type of franchisee that wisdom is looking for.
Frank, can I add on to that as well?
Sure.
Well, here's what else is exciting. They have to have people skills.
Yeah.
They have to have some organization sales skills. The reason why I say that, because I tell every franchisee, look, do you watch the Hallmark Channel? Now, y'all gonna laugh at this because I think it's cute and funny. But now I'm talking about the mystery, not the loved one.
Uh-huh.
Common thread is and most of them are the ladies,
Yeah.
they're a business owner. And everybody in the whole community knows that business owner, whether it's the cookie shop or whatever they have.
Right.
Everybody goes there. And I said, you have to be the mayor of the city and you have to learn how to network. Because senior care, really in a business, is personable. And see, with our target market, like Carolyn said, number one, with those clients, they're inviting us to come in their home. So we want to be mindful of their home, have that integrity, which is part of our core values. Being able to relate and have a good conversation with them, to be able to meet them at their needs. Then on the flip side, like she said, with the employees, it works the same way. Our third franchisee came through the ranks of wisdom.
Yeah.
She went through the school. She was a caregiver, CNA, supervisor, manager, but she had a dream and a passion to be a wisdom franchisee. In March of 2020, right during COVID, she was awarded.
Yeah.
And she's doing great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Carolyn, how do we help our franchisees to make sure they don't experience the burnout that you and I went through?
Yeah. And it's really key because once I got out of that, I told God, I said, if you give me an opportunity, I would share. And I want to be able to help people not have to get to that point. So one of the things that we do is help to teach our franchisees how to work on their business and not in their business. So that's where I was, Frank. I was working so much in my business. And I mean, I was a busy bee, just making sure. And then I would look up and say, oh my gosh, when did that happen? Right? So we help them by encouraging them to develop a team. So in our model, we have 5 key positions that we focus with them on. And when they get the right people in those seats, that helps them be able to keep that visionary view out of what they want to accomplish.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we don't want, obviously we want our franchisees to grow and expand, and we don't want them to experience burnout or stalling out, because then we can't serve all those potential folks. Yeah. So what's the investment range to open a location?
I'll let Charles tell you that.
The investment range is franchise fee is $51,000.
Okay.
All in, including, your fixed costs, operation costs, working capital, $130,000.
$130,000, and they're working from home, right? They don't need an office?
No, they do have to have an office space, and we do that for more than one reason. Number one, it's very professional when you have office space.
And most states were licensed as a you have to get state licensure, and they do require you to have a commercial. It does not have to be a huge building, just enough space for you to have interviews, for you to hold trainings in services for your skilled experts.
And being HIPAA compliant with records and of that nature. I mean, we do more like technology, but we have.
That makes total sense. And how big of an area does somebody get for their territory?
Okay, the territory we do by zip codes. So for population, because we have the analytics down where it's going to be 250,000 on up for 65 plus. And
Smart.
then for your zip codes, we do a range of 25 to 30 miles. So that can range from about 8 zip codes to maybe 10. In a larger city, because you may have public transportation, we can add more. But in
Mm-hmm.
outlying areas, they have to have transportation. So we have to probably put it about 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Look, the E-Myth book made a huge difference in my life too, like it did for you guys. It was an absolute game changer. It helped me get out of my own way. But I had already been franchising for a few years before I got introduced to the E-Myth. So my question for you is, what didn't the book prepare you for in franchising that once you franchise, you might have been a bit surprised? Like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Wow. People.
Exactly.
I have to.
That was a loaded question.
But I have to say people because, Frank, some reason in my mindset, I was like, hey, this is great. Now people don't have to go through what I went through. But do you know
Mm-hmm.
that it didn't prepare me that there would still be people who still wanted to join a franchise, so they thought, but they wanted to kind of still do their own thing in a little bit. I think
Yeah.
that's the part that really caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Here's a quote for you, Frank. We call it people are predictably unpredictably.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And we learned that from
Absolutely.
mentor because they come
Yeah.
up with all kinds of stuff.
They do. They want to put their touches on it sometimes. Now, some of the best ideas, truthfully, that we got in our franchise came from franchisees. So I think being super collaborative with our franchise owners is so important because they're on the front lines. We were on the front lines back in the day, but we're not anymore, right? So it's important, especially as trends change and
Yes.
people's likes and desires change, and heck, technology changes too, which also can
Yeah.
influence our business. But I think that for me, that was one big surprise. It was definitely the people, but it was also, I thought that people were going to be more like me.
Yeah,
Which-
that's what I meant too.
Yeah, which I'm glad they weren't, because I would be a terrible franchisee. I don't want to follow anybody's rules, so I would be a terrible franchisee.
I was like,
But all people's aspirations vary.
yes. Yeah.
They're right. They're not
Yeah.
like us where we want to, max out and do
Yeah.
as much as we could.
Yeah.
Right. Some people are happy at a certain level, and that was something I had to get used to. Do you guys see that too, where people are happy at certain levels? Not everybody has the same goals.
And and you explained it very well. That was it for me. And I had to really come to a peace within myself, Frank,
Yeah.
because I felt like someone would be awarded and they'll be just as hungry as I was, right? And I had to
Right.
get to a point because I started feeling like if someone didn't achieve what this goal I had in mind for them, that
Mhm.
it was me and I was the failure. And I'm not a
Yep.
failure, right? So I'm like, but
Right.
you can't make anybody. And I had to come to peace with that, to really be
Mhm.
honest. So, yeah, that was really amazing to me that you would be awarded and you wouldn't really be hungry like I would be for it. Yeah.
But you know what, Frank? It's a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because see what happens, you have some that are aggressive, go-getters
Yeah.
Mhm.
that want to yield the maximum. When we talk about with the KPIs and they're
Sure.
ready. But then you have others that they're comfortable,
Yeah.
and I really believe this, in their own self-image and self-esteem. So, if I can net 200,000 or 300,000, well, that's good in some ways. But if I
Uh-huh.
can net, maybe 100 grand or whatever, I'm happy. But it also affects our item 19. So
Mhm.
we have to be able to position that both ways, and then how we can explain the story.
That's a great point for sure. All right, Carolyn, where do you see the brand growing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so my eyesight is so much clearer now. I do see that in the next 5 years that we will cover all of the eastern part of the states, the eastern states,
Mhm.
having multi-unit. That was something I was not thinking about when we first started, but having multi-unit franchise owners is what we're seeing now in our landscape to be able to assist us to truly grow the way that we need to. I think when I first came in, all I really understood was one unit, but to really get that exponential growth that we're looking for, it's going to take a different type of business owner. So we are now looking at multi-unit franchisees, the mindsets that they have to help us be able to get wisdom into these different communities.
For sure. This might be really good for other founders that are watching this podcast. I'd love to get both of your take on how do you see the multi-unit franchise owners differ on how they think and act than your single unit franchise owners? Do you see a difference?
You do. I do. What I'm seeing is that they understand that it's important to have a team around them. They understand that it's important for them to work on their business and not in it. You don't find a multi-unit franchise owner in the weeds of their business. They have a great infrastructure that they've put in place, and they're always looking at how are they expanding, how they're growing. There's a hiccup that comes up. They know how. The other thing I see too, they don't take long they don't allow something that's not working to continue in that system long, before they're able to make the decision to change whatever it is that's not producing. And I think they have a really good, clear vision of their financials. And they understand what could be preventing those things from happening in the growth and they act upon it really quick.
And Frank, if I could just add on top of what Carolyn said, because see, one location, you're going to max out. And you're going to max out on a certain level gross wise. So with the multi-units, they're already thinking, wait a minute, to really yield my maximization in income, I got to have at least 2, max 3, and etc. Because we can only go so far on the borders of about 25 to 30 miles. The other thing is you have to look at with your labor.
Yeah.
Until robots come into the picture all the way, we still got to have the labor no matter how you look at it. So you can, you got to think different to scale, to still get that quality, but also reach the goals you want.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right, Carolyn, this was your baby, your vision from 11th grade.
Yes.
Where do you see, what kind of legacy do you want to leave with this brand?
Wow, that's neat. So many different aspects with it. It's already expanding more than what I had even thought or envisioned, right? And that's just how things happen, especially when God is involved in it. And we have 2 daughters and 2 adult daughters who work with us in our business. So we definitely see our oldest daughter. She just graduated from the IFA program. She had learned so much about franchising. She had been running our corporate units, doing a great job. You're talking about a young person who came in. That's when you say get out the way. She took the business to another 1.5 million, right? Just her ideas, her things coming in. She completed the Ascension program, and now she's looking at becoming part of the whole franchising unit, right? And so then I have 2 grandchildren right now. So I see this being truly a legacy of how that far down that goes, I think is just wide open. But I also see wisdom changing as the world is changing, as technology. I am so excited about this. You know how I told you in 2017 when we got franchising, it was like this light or plane just came up. Well, I just got it again. And it's in technology, right? And it's how different. So wisdom is getting paired. Not only will we be known for home care, right? Senior in-home care, but it's with technology and how technology is playing a part. So in that, and I used to think how technology was separate, right? And then you had had people who worked in technology, they were separate. And then you have people who work in the medical field. But you know what? When you start studying it, they're all the same. It's just different names that have been put in. So now the world is open to bring these two things together, and wisdom is going to be a big part of that technology revolution and seeing home care differently. Seeing our aging population when the baby boomers get there, they're not going to have home care, is not going to look like it looks right now. And I'm excited that Wisdom Senior Care is going to be a big part of that.
Hopefully she won't replace me with AI.
No. Charles, you are unreplaceable, my friend. Or irreplaceable. Well, Charles, you guys have been married for what, 33 years, you said earlier?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh my gosh, so what's been the secret to success in this marriage?
Well, first, God.
Yes. Yes.
God. Yeah. But we keep it fun.
Yeah.
We're friends. Not that it's always rosy, but
right.
At least 80% of it is 90% is rosy. And I had to submit myself. And when I say that, by her being the founder and CEO, but I'm okay. So Frank, when you ask the goal long term, mine is I want to be sitting on an island, resting and relaxing, eating bonbons and cherries. I might do a little work there. So, that's my goal.
Charles, it's not going to happen. Carolyn's shaking her head no.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. The boss is saying no.
But one thing that we do when he says you keep it fun is we always, when we're working, I think that's where it's not like it's real work. It's like, yeah, you have your struggles, but we try to make fun be part of the whole process that we're doing. But I think because of the fact that we truly were friends, we dated 7.5 years. Frank, before we got married.
Wow.
We really like each other as people because, because truly some people, they get together, but maybe they didn't really know each other, right? So I've seen Charles at his worst, he's seen me at my worst, and we still like each other. So I think that says something.
That is the secret. That's fantastic. Okay, Charles, if someone was interested in opening a franchise, where would they go?
Well, they would actually go to www.wisdomseniorcare.com. My email is charles@wisdomseniorcare.com.
All right. Awesome. I got one last question for you guys. All right. I call every podcast I finish with the franchise tip jar because the franchise community is so generous with sharing advice and tips. So, Carolyn, I'm going to start with you. What advice would you give your past self the night before you became a franchisor?
The night before I became a franchisor, I would give myself the advice to make sure that everyone that you put on your team has some franchising knowledge.
That is fantastic advice. I didn't do that, and I wish I had known that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Charles, what do you think?
Get as much education and knowledge as you can and really vet who you have on your team.
Guys, this was an amazing show. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to finally meet both of you and have you on. So thanks again, and I wish you all the continued success and continue this living legacy.
I love that. Living legacy.
Frank. We
I love
appreciate you, my
that.
friend.
Thank you, Frank. I'm going to use that. Thank
Thanks,
you for
guys.
having us on.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.